Hello, welcome to this podcast to nowhere. This is a brainstorming session that I will be utilizing as sort of a behind the scenes before the recording deep dive into the means behind sequential growth, i.e., the purpose of this. Thanks for joining. Thanks for listening. My name is Allie with Amory Speaks. If you are brand new to listening to my channel, thank you for checking this out. I do put forth different types of content, all of which centrally focuses around introspection, spirituality, and happiness. Sometimes I put forth things with visuals, and that's a bit more content-driven, where I'm kind of offering educational-esque material or teach-learning kind of scenarios. Other ones are bits of blabs, personal information, on my own spiritual practices and alchemy work. I have quite a few videos on spiritual discernment and on light shadow work, as in energy alchemy. So if you are looking for listening to my take on those kind of things, or interested in hearing, what I have to say on that kind of stuff, what I do as practices or whatever, I have a bunch of videos on my channel, or on my old channel as well. Amory Speaks without the number 2 next to it. We'll get you there. I'll try to put some links. I think I have a link in my description, still running sort of in my current blurb that I use, that I paste in there, that says, are you looking for my old content? Don't miss my old channel. And there's a link to it if you scroll in the description. There's quite a few things in the description. I usually put whatever's going on with myself in that description link, if people are ever want to look for other content from me, or ways to get in touch with me or whatever. It's all in there. So, thank you for tuning in. And today I'm going to be talking about organic math and this idea of purposeful measurements, of purposeful living, of sequential growth, which in itself designates that there is a sequential, purposeful flow, that energy, all things, thoughts, actions, and everything that's built out of that comes from and moves through. This is really like fundamentals. I feel like this kindergarten class for metaphysicists here, so welcome. I'd like us all to just really lean into and remember what it feels like to be sort of a kindergartner, a new learner, and let yourself be that student. Just like I'm not trying to put myself up on a pedestal thinking there's other students listening to me here and that kind of typical academic role. I don't align with that. In fact, I feel like that is counterintuitive and counterproductive to real learning, sharing, and teaching. I think there should be equal-footed gathering of sovereign worth. Yeah, you can talk about the more like literal translation of kindergarteners and teachers, and of course there's some seniority and maturity differences that should be respected and that are natural and purposeful. But as far as the exchange of information, that knowledge and wisdom transference should be on equal footing, should be a back and forth give and take between student and teacher always, no matter the age separation or even intelligence separation, sort of educated degrees of differences, because a true teacher is always learning from the way the student learns. A teacher loves to learn about the content material, wants to see it from a different perspective, wants to help troubleshoot, and understands that content and information is multifaceted, and that each sovereign individual out there in the third-party space has their right to their own perspective. And yes, it's different from theirs, and that's what makes it unique and beautiful. And that by tailor-fitting your teaching modalities and approaches and understandings to the student, seeing what they need, it teaches you a new way to teach. You're learning a new way to teach from each student based on how, if you allow yourself to see how they're seeing the content, how they're interpreting it, how they'd like to learn it, how they want to approach it. And then you morph your teaching into their ways and step into their shoes and try to learn it with them from that angle, because you love to learn. As teachers, we love to learn. We are eternal students. That's why we seek to turn around and teach, or not because we want to be on a pillared stance looking down on others, but because we see everybody in a great group with us, great students with us, and we want to share with our classmates what we know. We want to see what they know. And this creates a whole different, this is what I like about organic, calling it organic math, talking about positive organic systems, and seeing that the great gnosis behind our lives here, our purpose as humanity as a whole, is to be interacting together and sharing on common footing. That we're birthed here and we are on equal sovereign footing because we are alive and consciously aware and looking out of our own eyeballs. We have been bestowed with a gift of sight and conscious receptivity. No matter where the gauge lies on your conscious awareness, there's a receptivity for all individuals who are enlivened. I mean, every baby is its own unique self. You can't have an argument about truth. That's the beauty again. And when we start to really lean into what truth really means, the fact that it's inarguable, that it defends itself, it stands, anybody and everyone sees it for what it is, then we start to understand and work towards always aligning with what really feels true to us. That certain feeling of certainty, it will always sing through and resonate through all types of information, knowledge, and wisdom, all types of different energy embodiments of different values of light condensed into different versions of material matter. The truth sings through these things, and you will hear it more clearly, and you will also, hear distortions from different angles more clearly and understand whether they're negatively aligned or positively aligned. What they're truly seeking, what their real intentions will become quite obvious when we start to look with neutrality, with basic transparency at these things. That's my hope by even talking about these things, by teaching and learning more about them. Yes, I know I've already sort of done this stuff, but to me, I think there's such a deeper quality in combing through things and going over things in different ways. So I hope people enjoy that as well. And if you don't, I certainly have other content that you could fill your time with in different angles, or go find someone else to, or better yet, fill your own time with your content. Why don't you go talk about what you have on your mind in that way? Because that's what the collective needs to hear. If you have a different way that you see it with initiative, that you would do it straight away, or you have some kind of motivation within you to be doing, then go do it that way. And I don't mean that in a spiteful way either. I just mean it with full motivation that you really should. I'm getting a little carried away out of where I meant to be, but that's okay. So, meaning to get myself back into the avenue that I'd like to actually direct my kind of brainstorming towards. Spoke a little bit about this in a voice audio note that I left on my Telegram channel, but to dive into that a little more here. The first thing that I want to I have to hash out and say it really builds and shows how straight line curves, how we get from incremental, individual pieces that seemingly are disconnected and stand alone, how they can actually unite and become flexible and have movement between them. And I have a couple of different infographics that I've done some good visuals to show this through, and some of my notes as well, which I shared quite a few pages on just today, August 30th, 2025. That's today. I forgot to say that at the start. But anyways, showing sort of the lemniscatic looping flow that is available and that happens between essentially all of the numbers at all times. I think this is sort of just trying to remind us, and it's also math to show us the unseeable about this pulsating, flowing energy that happens, that is sort of reverberating through all of this universe. That would be sort of all the potentials alighting, recognizing, and choosing at, and then choice points furthermore happening because of those the previous choice points. The eternal flow of it is perfectly, to me, seen and sort of explained. I don't want to even try to explain it either, because this gets us too much into the control mechanisms of negative thinking and a negative agenda. Because really at the basis of the root of the great gnosis, of foundation of organic truth, to me, of real knowledge, is actually this great relinquishment of knowing the mystery of the model. I leave that great mystery of the model, the final cherry on top, to the infinite creator, source intelligence outside of this. And I, here within the constraints of the construction, I admit humbly that I'm a part of it. I'm a part of the construct here. And I have to relinquish that right in order to be a part of this. That is the key role of separation, of what we've chosen to do here, as in build a system outside that manifests, out of the unity, out of infinity, out of the entirety comes the finite, right? Comes the coordinate points that make up the potentials that could ever be seen as that. And herein lies the rub, again, with the search of infinity and the discovery of manyness, because once we've enabled that and hit go on that great exploration, all systems now are told, you must look at all the potentialities. You must go there. You must say, what if? What now? Because of this, what now? And in that great promise, that commitment to the happenings of what will happen if, we have the discovery of life here. We have this infinite exploration of diverse life forms and expressions of consciousness condensed into different formalities, different structures of isness. They're very general terms, but again, they're so firm, and they speak well for what it is, because it should be left unknown. That's what the variable's for. That's what algebraic thinking is all about. We don't define x. X is a placeholder. You can't say all of a sudden x has to equal 1 all the time. No, there's nothing to, you can't have any change that way, And so we are fractal representations of a discovery of manyness. We are given the potential source of free will here to discover within our own plane of space, what can happen if. But this is also the relinquishment here, and the understanding that there's purpose behind the quest. Says that, hold on, it's not all systems go. Every single potentiality must be discovered and to its extremity, because things can't work that way. Everything falls apart. It has to be a seeking of balance, of harmony, of give and take. That, duality, the scope and filter is the second stage for a reason. Yeah, we're meant to grow up out of it. And we're starting to get that sense, even collectively these days, that there's a sight above it, that it's not the only goggles to be worn. But it's the second stage, but we have 9 to grow through, But it has a firm understanding, and it needs to happen, and we have to have a firm understanding of it's working before you can rise up out of it. And you have to also have love and appreciation, and understand that integral purpose that interlocks all the stages, and that each phase has its right timing, and each phase has its own divine stages that it moves through. This is again about the looking at it as a stage of measurement on a measuring stick, and understanding that within each one, before it gets to 2, is like the centimeters, the millimeters down in there, available. If creator consciousness so chooses, you could zoom in and you add a 0 in there, and all of a sudden we have 1.01, and you have a ton of room to discover and a ton of time to do the discovering before you'd ever get to that number 2. And I think this is what I want to talk about here, is the responsibility of holding that mechanism, this zoom control in and out, the creator consciousness, and the role of the observer, the lens that we get to view things through. It's having the responsibility and accountability when you do things, and how you act and how you view and see things. Are you being pigeonholed into certain perspectives, or can you zoom up out and see the forest from, get out of the trees for a little while? There's always above and below. And that's the other thing, as above, so below tells us that the fractal creative consciousness shows us that we tend to sort of forget when it's convenient to us, because we have that power of dominion over the proximity of view that we choose to step into. And then we can make all types of things true, or right and wrong, based on how close or far you are into something, right? Think about murder. Think about starvation. How easy or difficult it is to deny food to someone that you don't know, versus denying food literally to like your child, someone that you love. Think about the thing, there is all types of different versions of closeness that metaphorically, spiritually, and metaphysically we can explore and discover. And they teach us by contrast and parallel and by commonalities even how to learn from different scenarios, different circumstances, and what we see based on how close we are to something. We can be blinded by things when we're in love with someone, right? Because we've chosen to zoom in to certain things. And when we have that close view, well, you've already designated that the external out there for now does not have as great a value. And that can have great purpose. It can have a good balancing act if we remember how to zoom out. If the things that we're zooming in to do are corrective holistically to the outer realms that are available to it, because everything sits inside bigger and smaller systems. And again, this is why the sequential growth and the understanding about the measuring stick, the 1 to 9, how each stage and phase contains and holds within itself larger and smaller versions. This is I love it's organic, because it teaches us fractally how we can be representations of infinite source creator, and how God itself can be everything at once, and yet nothing, and the same, and movement and change and up and down and everything that we think and ever have thought of, and on such a different gradient of value than we're jammed into viewing here in humanity's role. you know. So this sort of alive nature of numbers and connecting that zooming in and out function and the closeness with numbers is something that has helped me greatly, and as again why I'm making so many of these videos and talking more about it. The more that I learn about it, the more that it helps me as well. So one thing that I wanted to kind of again hash out here in this sort of brainstorming session in between what I've talked about with the initial point of view, the linear point of view, and seeing things on this measuring stick, straight one view, totality, really seeing the whole as one whole thing, understanding the measuring stick, what it's used for. It's just the numbers that we're going to look at, 1 to 9, and they're each one centimeter or whatever we want to call it. I was going to say an inch, but then we get into I'm going to be swapping between centimeters and inches, but who cares? The fact is the fact of the matter is they're each, you know, a meter. They're each one designated size that is in proportion to all the other numbers on the stick. And it's very straightforward and kind of cut and dry. That's the beauty of number one as well, and the first view, you know, is it's very simplistic. I used a single dot, or two dots with one line connecting it as an aligned single line segment. And it's point blank is what it is. The first kind of thing about the linear view that the conscious receptivity understands, like I said, is the gauging, is the understanding about how we could have 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4. And also the first thing that comes in with sort of our first view and the basics, fundamentals of it, is understanding the measuring part of it, you know, the quantitative value of what's happening, the accumulation of space that it happens, right? And the difference between that and counting one of a thing having 3 rulers, say, you know, 1, 2, 3, counting this quantitative value of separate whole things. With the measuring stick, with the linear scope view here, we sort of understand that what we're talking about is a qualitative understanding about numbers. We're talking about a whole fractional one, right? I hope that makes sense to people. This is another thing I'm talking about, the difference between quantitative and qualitative value, and how numbers don't just represent 1, 1, and 1, long car, you know, to count up a number of things, but that they also reflect this qualitative sense. They can have a concept to them. And so sequential growth is really about all of knowing and understanding the qualitative values, and also how these numbers and what they're moving through, how they move in itself. That's what I'm kind of calling organic math. And you know, this is just like things I'm kicking around, that they're nothing that I've learned somewhere, or you know, I think is it's just I don't have words quite for it. But anyways, the points of view that I'm discussing first and foremost really have to do with the way that all the numbers work together. Not so much just their qualitative values, but how we can move through them, how we can count them up, how we can look at them acting, because they actually are for movement. They're very not, you know, one-dimensional, as we've sort of been tagged down and forced to look at things only in this very one binary way. And again, this is part of many things. It's part of the negative agendas to really hold their control mechanisms. But again, it's part of the growth of ascension. We have come through 1, 2, 3, and so 2 is very close to us, and we've moved through 2. So, wonder it doesn't want to relinquish its sort of claws, and it holds a lot of the negative potentialities still, and allows that to anchor itself firmly into binary thinking, which lends itself into a very pragmatic singularity of source thinking, because it's so close to the one. And so we just have this one thing all the time, and it's very much like one system, one segregatory separate thing, and everything must be focused on its one system. Its one system must work, and it's, this is why things are leaning and so easily grow in a negative patterning, and can be sort of really focused on, and everyone can think that negative patterning is the only way to work. Negative systems are the only thing that will work, and it gets very strongly held belief that that's the only way it works, but it is not. It cannot be. We know truth, it has to have positive productivity. Nothing would ever get done if there wasn't positive productivity. It can't just all at the end of the day be YOLO, survival of the fittest, because it would only be a group of one monolithic thing. Which, I myself am a glitch in that theory. And I've spoke to many who are separate from that theory and who see it outside of that theory and think that theory's junk, and think well outside of it and do well for themselves outside of it, and see positive productivity and positive systems working really well. And so that in itself breaks all the rules they think that they would have everybody jammed down into, and then they'll say, they'll just flip it, the lie, even digging in even deeper, and try to say that the outliers prove the rules, the exceptions prove the rules. And that in itself is such a slave master turning of a cog in the wheel. It's a tightening of a screw that doesn't need to be at all. It has to tighten it down and firmer, because the truth is so freeing that you would break free at that moment and bust out of those chains if you don't tighten them at that moment. But we've been so conditioned to think that tightening down into those things is hearkening into truth, and we excuse the pain of it. But true truth, true goodness, organic flow never hurts. It always feels good. It's always freeing. It doesn't lie. It cannot. That in itself should get you questioning why you're tightening those bolts inside of yourself all the time. That's what got me questioning it, and what I try to set myself free at, because it's not that it just all of a sudden you're free and you float around. There's layers, there's levels to this. There's many different ways that happens. That visualization is a metaphor that gets placed upon so many different scenarios. And in fact, they can, be so habitual to hide in plain sight, or they can be straight up literally hidden from you, and you don't notice till you stumble on them. Just in doing great work, I find that the numbers, I find remembering the sequences, knowing that there's great truth to hearken into, architecture and blueprinting, that we can remember, that I remember, I'll always find my way. Doesn't matter how dark it is, because the path that I'm on is well lit. In fact, if I close my eyes, I see it better than when I'm looking around in the darkness. It's like if you get lost in your house, if the lights go out, the electricity goes out in your home, you have the entire map, especially if you've lived in your home for a long time. If you're in an unknown setting, sort of, it might be a little more difficult. But say in a home that that you've been lived in for a long time, those lights go out, you're disoriented for a moment because you can't see. But you have the map built into your house, of your house built into your brain. You know where you're standing. You know what your room looks like. You could imagine it and build it, and you can navigate through as long as you move slowly, and very aware of you could get around to wherever you need to go, right? That's what we're doing here. And in fact, if you let your imagination take you away crazily, you could get confused. You could be lost in your own home. You could start building out things that aren't even there and tripping over things and falling down and thinking you're in a quagmire or a sand pit or whatever, and just be stuck and lost. But that's of your own devices, of your own doing, No, again, I can't ever seem to get away from not talking about shadow work and truth and light. Darkness and shadows. But it all, again, comes down to the same workings. And when you have a great tool belt around you, when you have strong gnosis of knowledge to work with, then you turn on your flashlight. You remember. You stand up. You get up. There's a great whisper in you. There's a hug. There's a light, there's a warmth, there's something. Everyone feels it different ways at different times. Different lives, I don't know, but in my life it's been many different ways. That just keep on going and rekindle the gnosis, the knowing, the plan, the purpose. So yeah, it can be a straight trap. We can choose to stand in this kind of first, very, very zoomed in, singular point of view, like I said about the linear view. And even the secondary view, which I'm going to talk about in the next videos, and it is tightly segmented as well. It's this or that. It's a duality is its main focus, and it has a very segmented view. There's an uplifting happening. There is a chance to rise and to become better. There's also a chance to sink down and create negativity. When I say rise up, too, it can be a little confusing, and even when we first start to talk about this, the upwards is actually not so much a physical space as in a rising towards your truth and the truth. And I'll get into this a little bit more when we get into the spirals, into 3 and 4, I think. But just to know that don't allow yourself to just see this as the end-all, be-all and get really into seeing up and down, good and bad, heaven and hell, all these things becoming like solidified. They really are not. They are supposed to be these very thin surface level layerings that are reflective symbologies that are just meant to be a reminder, a quick fix reminder from a distance. And they become so much more different when you zoom in and when you really give them the real space they deserve for discovery. But again, this zooming in and out and understanding when we're in different phases and what stage should be allowed and viewed and observed and a part of has been highly tainted in the world that we've been brought up in and in the world we see around us. It's really negative. It's highly motivated by negativity. And organic sequences don't grow in that space. They wilt. They're limited and restricted. And it's positive cannot be limited and restricted. It wants to develop 360 degrees and find the most harmonious solutions and path through all of those points. But when you're saying, oh, you can't count these, oh, these are out of the parameters, oh, those are this and that from the very get-go, there's all these restrictive parameters that you've got to tiptoe and dance through. Organic doesn't want to do that. you know, and so then, you know, it doesn't fight. It's just going to wait. It's going to grow where it can, just like we see nature growing through harder seasons or harder times, or in developing locations, or in locations that are full of toxicity and degrading locations. It makes its way through the roads through concrete, but it certainly isn't a bush. It certainly isn't a beautiful field. But again, that teaches us, again, the truth of it. It resides through. There's the great gnosis, the negativity cannot last. It cannot be, as it tries to tell us it is, the end-all, be-all, the big boss. Sorry, you're not. And the more that with love, and with tough love and unconditional love, we say that, sorry, you're not, to the toddler, to the defiant, 2-year-old in there, that is such a puffed up ego. Between 1, 2, and 3, overexcited is the worst combinations, to get together in negativity, to hold out in a stalemate, that it's an eternal stalemate, perfect storm sort of situations. But yet we have to know it can't last forever. It doesn't last forever, but it doesn't stop them from telling us, especially in a full raging of the storm, that it won't last forever. But anybody who's ever seen a screaming toddler knows that they tire out. They do, after some time. And so it's been some time, and if I want to actually have this airing and condense down into something that could have a background to it and not a black screen, I guess I should probably leave it there. I spent my time up. And I've yet to really get around what I wanted to talk about, which is sort of that lead into the second sequence, and the development of movement, and of allowing this secondary to the space, the otherness, external differences and commonalities, to have free-flowing opinions and interactions, even if they are catalytic in a negative way. We can find positive building out of negative circumstances. And in fact, when we choose to let those things strengthen us, we find a diverse learning through there that creates better potentialities that in the future sense, This is bigger expansion. And again, I said I'll get into this sort of in the third and fourth, but how there's rings being added outwardly. Yes, there's a growing up that's happening, but each of these phases sits inside of each other, and so they all kind of are each other while they're not each other. It's sort of like volume. Each layer, each number has its own volume, and it could be turned up all the way or turned down to 0. And when we see 1, 2, 3, 4, and we say we have 1, and we're in these phases, it's really because 1's volume is turned up to 9, in there. And so it's the loudest, and all the other numbers are at 0. But then we should get to 2, 2 doesn't just go straight to 9. And then 3 to 9, and it doesn't really count that way. There's a phasing in and out, that happens, that builds up, so that we have, say, 1.9 doesn't just turn into 2.9 at 2 at full blast, right? We have the 1.9 turning into 2. 0.0, and then 2.1, and then we turn it up to 2.2 and 2.3, and we see that volume gauging up to hit its height. If we allow it to sing that way, But I think it's very easy to see it, cut and dry. But we're allowing ourselves to see it that way for convenience of explanation, because we set sacred boundaries as creator consciousness, because we're so far away from it that for convenience of explanation, we cut and dry it as those numbers. Always remembering honoring space for that 1.1, 1.2, all the way through 1.9 being held in there at all times. Rightfully discovering what it feels should be discovered at the moment. Not jamming all ones because, oh, we've got to do all systems go. No, it's not. And you have to do everything because you have to do everything discovery. And it's not, oh, you have to only do this best potential way and find that one singular best potential way because that's the way it must be. No, it's a gauging in between all of those things. And the way you stumble into finding your perfect way because you listen and hear the song. You watch and see the gauge of organic time, and you gauge your numbers with that flow, and you ride the tide, you ride the waves, and you find your beautiful counting within there by that. So yeah, I said before I was going to end up the video. I hope this hasn't gone too long. I'm at 40 minutes. I hope it'll condense down small enough to share. Thanks for listening to me today in this little brainstorming session. If you're interested in and missed the videos or the other brainstorming sessions that I've done about sequential growth, I'll try to put some of the links to those videos and podcast videos down below. Or if this is BitChute, I'll try to come back and put some in the comments so people can find them conveniently too. Anyways, thank you for witnessing my service to the collective. Thank you so much for your contribution to the collective. And see you next time.